4. And this is going to be World History for Ordinary People 29. And I introduced this segment with a little bit of Gregorian chant music, which I may do from now on. And we're going to continue to talk about the Far East. And part of the Far East is the very eastern part of Siberia. But I am trying to concentrate on China, and in that regard, I am going into looking into that book that I showed you last time about ancient Chinese literature and anthology. It's much too early for me to really start talking about that, though, because there's an awful lot there, and I want to make sure you know what I'm talking about before I talk about what's in that book. But it's actually, even though it's very scholarly, I mean, tremendous. It's easy enough to read and follow, so I'm very happy about that. But today, like I said, we're noting that the Far East, which what this is all about, at least this part of World History for Ordinary People, includes Eastern Siberia. And in Eastern Siberia is a well-known lake, Lake Baikal, which happens to be the largest lake in the world and the deepest. Now, by largest, I'm pretty sure what's meant is by volume, because the size, if you would look at it, you wouldn't think that it's necessarily the largest. But because of the depth, it's quite a lot of water in there. As a matter of fact, there's some statistic that maybe 1/5 of the Earth's fresh water is in Lake Baikal, something like that. But that region, Lake Baikal, now I'm going to try to show you where it is. Let's say this is China down here, and this is the Pacific, PAC, and you got Korea, you got Manchuria, right? And you got Mongolia. Okay, and this is the Russian East Coast. Okay, well, Manchuria, Mongolia. Well, this Lake Baikal would be right about here, and that's actually, it's a long north to south lake. The Mongolians, this is more or less their ancestral home. Okay? This is surrounded by mountains. All right? Maybe not very tall mountains, but it is. And it looks like it probably would have been a decent enough place to live at least part of the year. So the Mongolians, this is their ancestral home. But it also, there were other folks in the area. Now, the Mongols, of course, pushed on, and they did wind up here in Mongolia, which they started to do a lot of their raiding from. Now, in here also is mentioned that amongst these other folks there were the Aryans, which is, of course, a lot of controversy with the Aryans and all that went on in the beginning of the 20th century. But they were not Mongolian in their makeup. What they were, where they came from, it's mostly not clear. But they were tall, they were light-skinned, they were referred to as white. They had blue eyes, sometimes gray, and they had red hair. So they were definitely not Mongolian people. Now, there was also the Turks were around, and the Turks oftentimes took on the same appearance of being tall and being light-skinned and having red hair. There's the Turks around here, and the Turks and the Mongolians were vast enemies. The Chinese referred to them as Tartars, and sometimes calling Tata, something like that. Okay, I mean, the Chinese know that there was no way they were going to beat these people. They just pretty much gave up and went back to just concentrating on their civilization and what they were trying to do. Like, for example, create a lasting legacy of literature and art and government and all that stuff. So they said, you know what, this raiding and killing and all that stuff, let those people out in the steppes, let them take care of that. We'll do what we do, which is civilization. And none of these people are doing civilization, although the Turks did it to some extent. They started with some settlements. Anyway, the reason why we're talking about this is pretty much the Mongolians. They eventually do their raiding, and they emanate in every direction on the planet. They move into they move into Europe. They move into Russia, East Russia. They move into India. They come down and they filter into. They get into China. They get everywhere. Of course, Genghis Khan ruled China, and they hop off the coast, and they're in the Southeast Asian islands, and they, along with other people who came in from India, they do the island hopping all across the Pacific to populate the South Pacific islands, referred to often as the Polynesian, the Micronesians, and there's one other there. I'm not going to be able to say it right. So at least 3 different types. And in these, people are constantly noting, like in Borneo and other places, that the people, some of the tribes would have Mongol characteristics. They look like Mongols, which is, Mongols pretty much have a more rounded face, maybe have more almond-shaped eyes, and they're pretty much yellow, black hair, rather short, stocky folk. So you see Mongol and what have you. Well, and like I said, they went all over in all directions, and we came across this picture in National Geographic that shows a young lady, and the authors make note that she is obviously of Mongol extraction. Okay? And this is a 1925 National Geographic. And she's on the island of Rimatara in the Austral group. Now you may say, okay, where are those places? And how did the Mongols get there? Well, this is very interesting because this is pretty far out in the Pacific. And National Geographic loves maps, and so do I. But we're going to show you, we're going to try to show you where they are. Okay? So, right down here, you can see where I'm pointing at. Okay? And this is the Austral Islands. They're about here, and Tahiti is somewhere about here. So if you go southwest, you'll come up to these Austral Islands, and then you'll come up to this this island that this young lady was on, which I said was Rimatara. Now, the first map really doesn't give you a clear idea where they are, but over here, this is a larger map of the Pacific, okay, and they are over here. You see that? they're over here. Tahiti wants to go to somewhere around here. The Marquesans are somewhere around here. So out there, the remote reaches of the South Pacific was that lady, with young girl, with some Mongolian characteristics. So that's, to me, it shows you how widespread they are. Now, back in the days of living in Mongolia and such, the Mongols and other folks were carving in stone, and one of the things they carved were images of male warriors, and some of them got to be fairly large, like 12 feet, big carvings, big stones. And if you look at those carvings, and you'll find them on the internet, I found them on the Stone Sculptures Mongolian. And you look at them and you see a very close resemblance to the large stone carvings on Easter Island. And right off the bat, I'll tell you, they both positioned Easter Island and these Mongolians positioned these stones looking east. And it was something very worthy about looking east. And the resemblance is quite remarkable, particularly on some. They even seem to have the same headgear, caps, and what have you. So, and you know, there have been people that have been theorized that some of the cultures emanated out of the west coast of South America. Well, in part of my reading, I came across the fact that the people migrating here, there's Lake Baikal, but they migrated here, up and over and across into the New World. Time frame, I don't know. But they say that in their canoes, they would carry their little stone-carved gods. Maybe you want to call them tikis. Stone-carved gods. So, at least one little piece of evidence that people with the technology and the know-how to carve in stone came out of Siberia, moved up, and went into South America. A lot of people, historians, are always amazed at where did these South Americans learn how to carve in stone? You know? Just one, for example, is the interlocking of the major, big-time blocks of stone in walls throughout the Inca kingdoms. They were earthquake-proof. Earthquake-proof. We can't do that today with modern technology. But these people could carve stones and make them earthquake-proof. And in those jungles, I think around in Bolivia, they have found, you know, figure carvings and so on. Is it a rap? No, not in the least. But you know, this technology of the Mongols seems to have spread and radiated in many directions. And for today's talk, which is quite brief, I'm going to bring it to an end, and I will pick up on the East Asia, because that's what I'm concentrating on. East Asia, be it up in Siberia, be it down in southern China, be it in the Central Asia. Central Asia is, you can't talk about any of these areas without somehow bringing in Central Asia, all those peoples and nations that today we're more aware of. But this was all going on in, 1,000 years ago and more. And the interaction was quite a lot. Although there was a lot of contraction and then a lot of going forward again. And one of the major movers to make these nomads move was nature. Get too cold, they'd had to move. Get too hot and dry, they had to move. It was always on the move, and it seems that the major path, because in their way was the Gobi Desert. Okay, so in their path, in their way was that desert. They had to go. It seems to me like over the top. A lot of mountains. But in the between the mountains and in the valley were these steppes, the grasslands, and they followed these as natural corridors to the west. Okay, and that's what they did. Sometimes they went down this way and went towards and near Persia, but the grasslands and the steppes down above the Gobi, and then through the mountains out to the west, and then they came across those spectacularly fertile areas north of the Caspian and around the Black Sea, and then on into the also very fertile area of the European steppes, which were much less of a wide corridor, but nonetheless a corridor. So people were on the move, and they still are. People like to move. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. See you next time.